I want to introduce you to a man named David Rice Atchison. You ever hear of him? He was a U.S. Senator from Missouri, but what happened to it? There it is. All right. But he is also known in history as the man who was president for a day. He was president for a day. In the election of 1848, Zachary Taylor was elected president, and he succeeded James Knox Polk. When Inauguration Day came around, March 4th of 1849, that day fell on a Sunday, and Zachary Taylor refused to be sworn in on a Sunday. You don't hear about things like that these days anymore, do you? But he would not do it on the Lord's day. But yet James Polk, his office expired at noon that day, so he was no longer president. And they hadn't sworn in the new president, so theoretically it fell to the man, well, the vice president, his term expired too, so it fell to the third in line, which was David Rice Atchison. So he became president for a day. And now historians dispute that. They say it's not really true. He wasn't sworn in as president. In fact, when he was interviewed later in his life, he had asked what he did, how he spent his day as president. He's like, well, I slept most of the day. It was Sunday, you know. And but he had some fun with it. There was a judge from North Carolina who woke him at 3 a.m. and says, hey, you're president. How about making me Secretary of State? Not that he could do anything like that, but he had fun on Sunday. Monday came around, he lost his office, and it went to Zachary Taylor. They've got a museum in his honor, and it's the smallest presidential museum in existence. But again, was he officially president? Sounds like he wasn't, since he never took the oath. But it makes you wonder, you know, what do you do when you're waiting for the real guy to come along? You can't exist without government. And we're going to elect our president this week, aren't we? And then he or she, who knows? We're going to have a president, and they'll be sworn in January, right? I believe. Is that the 20th? January 20th. And that person, like it or not, it'll be their office, it'll be their title, and they'll serve until it's time. And we're going to get a glimpse in our story today of a similar situation, but of much greater magnitude. The title is For Your Salvation I Wait. Last time we looked, Jacob gave a blessing to his two grandchildren, whom he said he was adopting as his own sons, but he gave them a blessing. But now he's taking his 12 sons by his sickbed. He's about to say goodbye to this earth and go to be with his fathers, to be with God. And he's given a blessing, but these blessings have quite a prophetic element. And he exclaims in the midst of it all, "For your salvation I wait, O Lord." And one point I want to get across to you, there is only one, and that's a capital O. There's only one worthy to lead God's people. There's only one worthy to lead God's people. Jacob had 12 sons, and he goes down the line in birth order, except in one instance where he reverses Zebulun and Issachar. Issachar was actually born first, but he's blessed after his brother Zebulun. He gives some sons much more, much more of a blessing, more detail, more time than others. Some of the sons, their blessings are very obscure. We really don't know what to make of it. But there's a blending in these blessings. Speaks to their own individual character as men, but also looks ahead to what they will become as a tribe in the nation of Israel, and has some prophetic elements. And we'll just cover one group. We'll jump ahead and cover 6 sons, Zebulun, Issachar, Dan, Gad, Asher, and Naphtali. They're kind of the obscure sons. Not much goes on with them. Zebulun, he says in verse 13, will dwell at the seashore. He'll be a haven for ships, and his flank shall be towards Sidon. Issachar is a strong donkey lying down between the sheepfolds. When he saw that a resting place was good and that the land was pleasant, he bowed his shoulder to bear burdens and became a slave at forced labor. Looking ahead to the future settlement in the Promised Land, these tribes, it speaks to kind of the region where they will rest. It's interesting, though, that he says Zebulun will dwell at the seashore, because that tribe did not inhabit an actual coastal area, but where they did rest, it gave them great access to all the trade routes. Issachar, strong as this tribe may be, to give itself into bondage is very unfortunate. Moving on to Dan, he says Dan will judge his people. Of course, you can look ahead to the book of Judges, and the name Dan has a meaning there, synonymous with judge and justice. One of the famous judges, Samson, was of the tribe of Dan, and he had many mighty victories over the Philistines, yet he was a man of corrupt character. And in verse 16, Jacob says, Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, a horned snake in her path that bites the horse's heels so that his rider falls backwards. And it's interesting that he mentions biting the horse's heels, because in verse 19, as for Gad, he says, raiders shall raid him, but he will raid at their heels. Now, Jacob himself was known when he was born, he was grasping the heel of his own brother. So to see this continuation of grasping, biting the heels, and the violence that still carries on generations after him, makes him exclaim between the two blessings in verse 18, for your salvation I wait, O Lord. Dan was a tribe that was settled in the northernmost part of the nation. When other nations tried to move in and conquer them, they were the first ones to receive the brunt of it. And so there was always trouble there. They fought back hard, but they were never truly at peace. Gad, the same as said, raiders raiding, but fighting back. And all Jacob wants is for the people that come from him to just know peace, to be redeemed, to be saved by the Lord, because they are unable to save themselves. For your salvation I wait, O Lord. Asher, he says, his food shall be rich in verse 20, and he will yield royal dainties. There's a prestige there. They seem to be very wealthy, but everything they produce is given to the king. Now, whether by choice or by force, it's obscure. But it seems positive. At the same time, they're always subservient to another. Naphtali is a doe let loose. He gives beautiful words. Hard to really pinpoint what he's saying there, but there's just kind of out there and roaming, untethered, not really following anyone particularly. Now, he gives prominence to his firstborn children, the first four, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, and then his last two sons born, Joseph and Benjamin. Of course, the two groups, the first four, children of Leah, the last two, children of Rachel, Jacob's, the wife he truly loved more than Leah. Of Joseph, he says in verse 22, Joseph is a fruitful bough by a spring, in branches, its branches run over a wall. Much strength there in Joseph, but he looks back to his own life, the life of Joseph. The archers bitterly attacked him and shot at him and harassed him. Joseph went through so much adversity, so much attack from his own kin. But verse 24 says, his bow remained firm, his arms were agile. But he doesn't attribute this to Joseph's own strength or even any strength that Jacob himself gave him. He attributes it to God. He says, for the hands of the mighty one of Jacob, from there is the shepherd, the stone of Israel, from the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you. The victory that Joseph enjoyed came from God alone. Joseph knew that. He never took pride. He never boasted about how far he had come. He only boasted in the Lord. And Jacob could see that it was God alone who got him where he arrived. From the God of your father who helps you, and by the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb, the blessings of your father have surpassed the blessings of my ancestors. Jacob could look at his offspring, especially looking at Joseph. And when he'd heard the stories of his own father, Isaac, talking about the blessings that God had given him, and stories of his grandfather, Abraham, and all the mighty blessings, the mighty victories that God had given him, he could look at his son Joseph and see how far God had brought him and how much God had helped him. And he could say confidently, with all assurance, that I have been blessed more than my ancestors. My father Isaac and Abraham before him, they have not seen the blessings that I have seen. And that's a testament to God that we worship, because if every generation can say we have been blessed more than the generation past, then that's a God we can trust. It's a God we can depend on. If we look back to the previous generations and wonder why we're not blessed like they've been blessed, then we're saying to the world our God is weak. His power is diminishing. His strength is waning, and He will not lead us for much longer. But that's not the God we're here to worship, is it? The God we're here to worship is as strong as ever. His blessings are as bountiful as ever. And so He has not exhausted His riches on the last generation. He has much more to give us who abide in His Son. And that's reason to be thankful and hopeful and to persevere. Jacob could see God's strength through his son Joseph, and he had nothing to fear as he began to close his eyes and slip away from this world. He did not hold on in fear. I must stay longer to make sure that things go well. He was confident, and he could rest truly in peace, as we say of those who depart. He was resting in peace, knowing that God was blessing his family, keeping his promises of making a great nation. Despite that, he looked at his son Benjamin. Again, the favored son. Benjamin, he says, is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, and in the evening he divides the spoil. There's an element of success there, yet there's also an attitude of strife, ravenous wolf devouring. Of course, we know that the first king of Israel, Saul, was of the tribe of Benjamin, and he did not please God. Which takes us back to the beginning of the chapter. says, my might and my strength, my dignity, my power, it was yours because you were the firstborn. You didn't take it from me. It was my gift to you. And because it was my gift to you, it was mine to take away. And he says, I've taken it from you because you have sinned against me. You rebelled. He says, you were uncontrolled as water, and you shall not have preeminence because you went up to your father's bed. Remember, Reuben went and slept with his father's concubine. A grievous sin, just utter rebellion, utter disregard for the honor that was due his father Jacob. And so it no longer mattered that he was the firstborn, no longer mattered that he had the birthright, that he had this inheritance, because it would no longer be his. And when we think of the tribe of Benjamin and the king that would come from that tribe, Saul, it was his as a gift. Saul didn't fight for the kingship. God chose him and anointed him. But Saul was disobedient. He was unfaithful, and he took the kingdom from him. And he would not have a lasting dynasty. We got to be careful too, because we have not earned our place in God's family, have we? We did not achieve this to where it's ours and it's owed to us. It's a gift. He has been gracious to bring us into his fold, to adopt us as his children. And we're warned in the New Testament, if he could cut away the branches that were from the vine, how much more in danger are those who've been grafted in if we don't remain faithful? We must remain faithful to the God who saved us. Likewise, Simeon and Levi, two brothers, he says, their swords are implements of violence. Let my soul not enter their council. Let not my glory be united with their assembly, because in their anger they slew men. And he looks back to the past when they went into the town of Shechem and they slaughtered Hamor and his son and all the people of the city. He says, cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And that literally happened because Simeon's tribe, when they went into the promised land to receive their allotments of land, Simeon's, they wound up with tracts of land inside Judah. So in essence, they became swallowed up by the tribe of Judah. And Levi, of course, did not receive any land as their inheritance because they were ordained by God to serve as the priests. Again, clearly not by anything Levi did to earn that position. God chose them. In fact, even Aaron, the first priest, had his share of missteps that you read about in Exodus and Leviticus and Numbers. He says, I will disperse them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. And so Reuben, the firstborn, has lost his birthright. It should have gone to Simeon or Levi, but they forfeited it as well. And so it goes to Judah. Not that Judah was a man of much more noble character. We've read about his exploits before, how he essentially basically slept with his daughter-in-law and impregnated her. But he says, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp, or a lion's cub. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. And to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. He ties his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are dull from wine, his teeth white from milk. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Looking ahead to when one from the tribe of Judah would become king of Israel. And we know that as David. And because David served well, unlike Saul, who did not serve well, but was disobedient to God's command, David served him, and God promised him an everlasting dynasty. And so the country of Judah, even as the kingdom of Israel split into two, Judah always had a man from David's line on the throne. He ties his foal to the vine, shows the wealth of this man. Because what happens if you tie your donkey to a vine? What's the donkey going to do to it? He's going to eat it. He's going to eat the grapes on the vine. And so a man wouldn't do that unless he had just so many grapes to spare. He didn't care if the donkey ate from the choice vine because he had tons of grapes. Washing his garments in wine. Again, the abundance there. His eyes are darker than wine. His teeth are whiter than milk. He has so much. But as we look deeper into this, we know he's not talking about an ordinary man. It's not just a man Judah. It's not a man David, because those types of people, their wealth does find its limit. Their abundance does get exhausted. They run out of resources. But when we look deeper at what he's saying, we understand he's talking about not David or Solomon or Judah or anyone. He's talking about the only one who is worthy to lead God's people. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until Shiloh comes. Now that's what my translation says, until Shiloh comes, and maybe yours says the same thing. But Shiloh is not a name of a person, and it's not a name of a city. It's not, some translations render it until he comes to Shiloh. And but it's even then, it's not what's really being said here. Shiloh is not a proper noun, but a phrase that says the one to whom it belongs. So literally, Jacob is prophesying the scepter shall not depart from Judah until the one to whom the scepter belongs comes. You understand? Are you with me? The scepter will not depart Judah's hand until the rightful owner arrives. Now, it's no secret to you that rightful owner is Jesus Christ. And now, he came into this world born of a woman in the tribe of Judah. He was Jesus of Nazareth, a descendant of David. So legally, he had that right, but that right didn't come just from his birthright. It was ordained and anointed by God himself. The Son of God was the rightful owner to lead the people. To him, to Christ, shall be the obedience of all the peoples. He is worthy of all the praise. And he has the vine, and he has the grapes. He washes his garments in wine. He washes us with his abundance and his gifts. The Bible lends credence to that in, I believe it's Ezekiel. Ezekiel 21. In verse 26, it says, "Thus says the Lord God, remove the turban and take off the crown. This will no longer be the same. Exalt that which is low and abase that which is high. A ruin, a ruin, a ruin I will make it. This also will be no more until he comes whose right it is, and I will give it to him." The prophet is saying Judah, you have lost the right to rule. Israel, you have lost the authority as God's people. I'm taking it from you, and I will give it to the one who is coming, the Son of God, the Messiah. So in this prophecy of Genesis, Jacob talking to his sons, there are some sons who've lost their authority because of their actions. There's some who haven't done much of anything to warrant much verbiage about them. And there's some who seem to get much, and clearly they didn't do anything to earn it. But God has always been in control of his plan to save. Starting with this nation that he called out of the world when he started with Abraham, and he made a promise. And he's kept his promise through these generations, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And through the 12 tribes, he's keeping his promise. And as they settle into Egypt, and eventually a ruler of Egypt rises who didn't know about these stories and is troubled by their presence and puts chains on them, God is still keeping his promise. And when he brings up Moses, who brings them out, and God brings them out with a mighty hand and leads them to the promised land, God is still keeping his promise. And he has kept it, and has kept it, and has kept it. And Christ has come into the world. And Christ, the rightful owner of the scepter, he reigns today. He has purchased your salvation with his own blood. And he rules. The glorious news for us is he's coming back. And for us, it's not a moment too soon, right? We're troubled. We're like Jacob crying, "For your salvation I wait." We're troubled by the prospect. We're troubled by the direction our country is headed. We don't trust our leaders. I certainly don't trust any of them. And no matter how much you support one candidate or another, none of them are worthy to lead God's people. And that's okay for us because we're not looking for a leader like that. Because we're focused on the kingdom. Our concern is the kingdom. And we can live in this world, and we can live in these nations, and we can serve these leaders or be served by them, depending on how the government works. But there's only one worthy to lead us, and that's Christ. The scepter, the rule, the crown, the right to rule is his. And no matter how a president feels about the church, they can never take the crown off Christ's head. They will never remove him from the throne. And as long as Christ reigns, we are safe with him because we rule with him. We are redeemed. And there's nothing for us to fear. Because whatever harm falls us, they can't touch our soul. That's the one thing they cannot have. Don't give it to them. They cannot touch your soul. That soul is Christ's. He bought it. So we serve a risen Savior. He is worthy to have it. He's worthy to have that crown. He's worthy to have that title. And so we're waiting for his salvation. It may not come this week as much as you want it to, guys, but he's coming back. He's coming back. We just wait. And we serve him.